The case of Romina Nunez several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism. The very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself, we can say, typical. Her husband beat her, and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denouement of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it, which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Nunez? Romina Celeste Nunes Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister somehow. At the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future. But happiness ended as soon as Nunez learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age, will never be able to become a mother again, so there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family, and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more. Money is catastrophically lacking. And Mother Romina had to now support a grandson, moving to Spain. Romina, depressed by the situation, she wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family. But find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay, she still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt, who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things, and having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, went on the road. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister for a while, deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty got a job as an administrator in a hotel, where she received a decent salary. Part of the money she sent home, and for the rest rented a separate apartment, so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Nunez met a man named Javier, with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children, but nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house, where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain. New lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Nunez went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raul Diaz Chikon. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked this statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raul was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. But the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from 2 failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around, telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises almost every day. He arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Nunez did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raul did not maintain any relations not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant. First-time lovers lived in threes, along with Romina's youngest son. Raul tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raul, promised a long and happy life together, in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife, without hesitation, agreed. But only Raul insisted that they need time for 2, so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full after the wedding. In fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chikon bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and 1 return ticket, just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raul's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house. But the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months, she was perfectly happy alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom, literally on his knees, begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Nunez did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened. And on August 10th, Making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man who would soon take her life in cold blood. One last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her in the short time they had not seen each other. Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp, and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina, secretly from her mother, borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it, but Nunez still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raul, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull, when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and shorter, and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raul again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raul a message in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police. This time, the son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon the wife will cool down and return. Because before, according to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raul went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raul still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money, and he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children, so he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raul hiding? Raul was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcers seriously decided to take him seriously, as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, but never went into details, and others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Chikon under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched, and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect himself of anything. Nevertheless, the investigation continued, and soon it became known about the visit of Nunez to the hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings, and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report, but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raul calmed down a bit, and in a telephone conversation with his relative, who worked in the police, blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case, and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events according to Raul? His wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home, and when he said he was not ready for that, she threw a tantrum, started fighting and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down, and when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life. According to his version, the woman suffocated because she was very drunk, but he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death, or even accused of murder. So Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Chikon said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard, and since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts, packed in different bags, and a couple of days later rented a car, which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island, where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence police spent weeks combing the shoreline in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments on the bottom, aviation, and a considerable number of volunteers. But all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda, used to remove organic contaminants, and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romina's fingernail with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the end of February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Romina. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found and the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Chikon had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raul changed several lawyers, and under pressure of evidence, he did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle, rather than finding her dead in the bathtub as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence Romina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018 when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. According to statistics, approximately 30% of violent crimes committed around the world remain unsolved, despite the rapid development of technology and techniques, as well as the creation of extensive DNA databases. As a rule, most of these crimes are solved on hot tracks, but there are cases when the investigation lasts for years or even decades before the perpetrator is punished. But the Ellen Ray Greenberg case, which we will look at in this video, is interesting in that for many years of investigation, it has hardly moved forward. The case has been investigated with numerous irregularities, and over time, there are more questions than answers. The brutal murder of a young woman to this day remains a mystery, and what is remarkable is that the investigation is trying hard to prove that the cheerful Ellen, who was enthusiastically preparing for her own wedding, suddenly decided to leave her life. But let's try to understand everything in order. Who is Ellen Ray Greenberg? Ellen was born in New York in June 1993 in the family of Sama and George Greenberg. She was the only child of her parents, growing up in love and care. During high school, the girl was actively engaged in team sports and even gave hope as a promising athlete. She was an active, restless, and sociable child, but at the same time studied well, showing a special interest in the humanities. After graduating from high school, Ellen became a student at Pennsylvania State University, where she received a degree in public relations. But having started working on a specialty, Greenberg realized that this is not what she would like to devote her life to. Parallel to work, the girl enrolled in the correspondence department of the Pedagogical Institute. A few years later, she brilliantly defended her diploma and moved to Philadelphia, where she was hired to work in one of the local schools as a junior high school teacher. According to relatives, Ellen's life was going great. She was full of enthusiasm, made big plans for the future, and simply adored her work and small students. At the same time, Ellen met a boy with whom she had a torrid affair, and soon they began to prepare for their wedding. The girl's favorite was a young man named Samuel, or just Sam, Goldberg. He was from a fairly wealthy and well-known family in the city. His parents owned their own large business, and his uncle had a reputation as one of the best lawyers in the state. The young men met in 2009 at a party, thanks to their mutual acquaintances, and immediately liked each other. The friendly interaction quickly turned into a rapidly developing romantic relationship, and soon they decided to move in together and live together. On the eve of 2011, Sam made his beloved a proposal, which was the best gift for the new year. He gave her a beautiful diamond ring, and the couple began to prepare for the upcoming wedding, which was scheduled for the spring of the same year. Family members of both young people took the news with joy, and it seemed that the happiness of lovers can no longer interfere with anything. Ellen plunged headlong into the pleasant troubles associated with the wedding, making lists of guests and sending them invitations, choosing a venue and elements of decor for the event, trying on wedding dresses, trying to create their ideal image, and planning a honeymoon. It is noteworthy that almost all these issues the bride was engaged in independently, and the groom did not visibly participate in the process. But loved ones did not attach much importance to this, and Helen never complained. True, there were some oddities, to which everyone paid attention only after the tragedy occurred. In January 2011, the weather in the city was very snowy and frosty. On the 26th, Alan went to work at school as usual, but close to noon there was a strong wind and a blizzard, so classes were canceled and students and teachers were sent home. Ellen returned to the apartment she and Sam shared. It was in a cozy apartment complex located in one of the quiet areas of the city. Soon Sam returned home as well. According to some reports, the couple that day quarreled, which was mentioned in passing, and Sam himself, but later he began to deny it. Close to 5 p.m., Sam decided to go to the gym located in the same apartment complex. He was gone for less than 1 hour, but when he returned, he could not get into the apartment because the door was locked from the inside. Sam first knocked loudly and insistently, then began calling his fiancée by name, which attracted the attention of neighbors, and then began calling her on the phone and sending messages. No one responded to his yelling, knocking, and calling, but it was heard that the phone was inside the apartment. Sam then went to the first floor of the building to the security guard to ask for help. Samuel explained the situation to him and asked if it was possible to open the front door, to which the guard replied that this was beyond his authority and that he could not leave his post by instruction. Then Sam went back up to his floor and decided to act on his own. He slammed his shoulder into the door, and the first time he did it, he managed to break the latch. It was quiet inside. Ellen's call was never answered, and when he entered the kitchen, he saw a gruesome sight. His fiancée was sitting on the floor, leaning back against the cabinet door, her body slashed with a knife and her clothes stained with blood. Sam immediately started calling emergency services, describing the situation, and when asked to check if the girl had a pulse, he acted strangely, asking several times if he really needed to do that. Then there was silence, and afterwards Sam suddenly stated that there was a knife sticking out in his fiancée's chest, which, allegedly, he had not noticed before. He also added that Ellen was obviously already dead. The police officers who arrived on the call were quite surprised, and noted that they had never seen such a thing in their many years of practice. The door was indeed locked from the inside with a latch, which Sam had subsequently knocked off with his shoulder. There were no signs of forced entry or the presence of intruders in the room. Nothing had been stolen from the apartment. All valuables and money were still there. Nothing had been searched or touched. But the most interesting thing began when the body of the dead girl was examined. No signs of struggle or attempts to defend herself were found, as if everything happened suddenly, and the victim simply did not have time to react. On her body counted about 24 stab wounds of varying depth, and the final blow came to the heart, and it took Ellen's life. We will return to the blatant negligence with which the crime scene and the body of the deceased were examined a little later. This negligence allowed a lot of evidence to be missed and left a possible perpetrator at large. But even more strange was the behavior of the police, who even before the medical examination thought that Ellen had done this to herself. Panic attacks, visits to a psychologist, and prescription drugs. In favor of the version of voluntary departure from life was the fact that Ellen, since some time, began to suffer from anxiety disorder and panic attacks arising on its background. The situation was so serious that Ellen even sought help from a psychologist. Close, she tried not to complain, so as not to worry them, and relatives in turn associated changes in Ellen's behavior with stress and excitement before the wedding. However, the specialist who worked with Ellen prescribed her 2 medications, which she took regularly to combat her anxiety. As the psychologist himself would later report, neither of these drugs, neither together nor separately, could in any way aggravate Ellen's mental state and cause thoughts of death. The specialist also noted that despite her anxiety, the patient never had such thoughts. In addition, Ellen's friends and colleagues noticed that after she and Sam started living together, her behavior began to change. In addition to becoming anxious and restless, Ellen almost stopped making any decisions on her own. In every situation, Ellen would say that she needed to discuss it with her fiancé, that she couldn't give an answer without consulting him. Similar oddities noticed, and parents of the deceased, but every time her daughter tried to complain to them about her difficult emotional state, she added that Sam had nothing to do with it. And 3 weeks before the tragedy, Ellen told her mother that she wanted to quit school, drop everything, and return to her parents' house. Her mother was very surprised at her daughter's words, but assured her that she could return home at any time, and her parents would accept her without question. However, Ellen never brought up the subject again. Later, it was hypothesized that after the couple moved in together, Sam began to show violence towards his fiancée, and she was scared, afraid to tell anyone about it. The psychologist Ellen consulted did not confirm or deny this version, but noted that Ellen had difficulty articulating and expressing what she was experiencing and what was bothering her. It was as if she wanted to share something important, but the fear was stronger than that. Oddities and inconsistencies in the case. This unusual case from the very beginning raised a lot of questions, but most interestingly, no one even tried to find answers to them. The carelessness with which the examination of the crime scene and the body was conducted, as well as the expertise, is simply astounding. Many circumstances, facts, and evidence were simply ignored and irretrievably lost, and without them it was impossible to restore the full picture of the incident. To begin with, on the hands of the victim, was not found typical for self-defense injuries, which means that the girl was not trying to defend herself. But at the same time, on her body revealed numerous hematomas, which, judging by the degree of healing she received several weeks ago, the fiancé explained that these are most likely the consequences from playing team sports. However, Ellen's parents assured that their daughter had not visited gyms and playgrounds for a very long time because of the workload at work, as well as active preparations for the wedding. No suicide message was found. Ellen looked like a victim of a brutal massacre, but despite this, almost immediately a version of voluntary departure from life was voiced. Moreover, there were food, spices, and a cutting board on the table in the kitchen. So, according to the logic of the investigators, Ellen started to cook dinner, but suddenly changed her mind and decided to cut herself to death with a knife. Further, as I have already noted, on the body of the victim counted 24 penetrating wounds of varying depth, and forensic examination showed that 10 of them were inflicted from the back, so if the girl was attacked from behind, and some of them were serious enough, and if they did not kill Ellen immediately, then certainly deprived her of the ability to move and resist. It is simply impossible to inflict such injuries on oneself, and then to stick a knife into one's heart to the hilt, and this caused medical experts to doubt the originally announced cause of death. However, despite this conclusion, the investigation continued to insist on the previous version and refused to initiate criminal proceedings. The main argument was the absence of traces of strangers in the apartment, as well as the absence of signs of self-defense. By the way, there were also some doubts about the possibility of penetration into the apartment, because the latch on the inner part of the door was also very peculiar. It could be closed from the outside, but not completely. If the latch had been closed from the inside all the way, it would have been impossible to break it out with a single blow of the shoulder without damaging the doorway. But, judging by the nature of the damage, it was only partially closed, and it could have been done from outside the door. Although the victim's spouse or partner is usually the prime suspect in such cases, Sam has always remained above suspicion. No charges were brought against him, and it was only on the day of the incident that he was interviewed at the station in the presence of his uncle, who, as already mentioned, was a well-known and influential lawyer. Moreover, the whole picture and sequence of events of that day was reconstructed only according to the words of Sam Goldberg, who at times was confused in his own testimony, but wrote everything off as stress. Neighbors confirmed only that they heard the knocking and screaming of a guy who could not get into the apartment and called his fiancée, but that's all. Sam further claimed during his testimony that he went to the security guard for help, and the guard went upstairs with him and saw him kicking down the door. But the guard denied this information, saying that he had not left his post. Strangely enough, but the investigation did not return to this issue, considering this detail irrelevant. A recording from only one surveillance camera leading to the gym was also checked, It shows Sam walking towards the gym and then walking back. But in the interval between these two events, he could well have gone out through another passage and then returned to the gym in the same way. However, his alibi was not checked, and possible witnesses who could confirm that he had been working out or deny it were not even looked for. Sam did not call the police until an hour later, after he found the door locked and his fiancée unresponsive to knocking and shouting. In addition, the officer who took the call noted that Sam was acting strangely. Despite the fact that he was screaming and wailing, the specialist thought that it was a feigned panic because Samuel was calm enough to answer questions and his voice was not shaking. When he was asked to start resuscitative measures, he first doubted the need to do so, then quieted down, and then, and after all, reported about a knife sticking out of his girlfriend's chest, which earlier he allegedly did not notice. It is noteworthy that before calling the police, the guy called his parents and his lawyer uncle, who arrived at the apartment before the police. To the station to testify, as already mentioned, Sam also went together with his uncle. In addition, the next day, Sam went back to the sealed apartment with the same uncle to get some personal belongings and took out all of Ellen's gadgets. They took 2 laptops, a phone, and a tablet of the deceased. When the investigation suddenly decided to check these devices a few days later, it turned out that the search queries included topics related to voluntary demise. The police officers who arrived at the scene made only a cursory examination of the scene and concluded that Ellen had taken her own life. Subsequently, despite the emergence of new details, they refused to change their verdict. The order of the wounds could not be established, but it is certain that the final blow was a blow to the heart. The medical examiner who conducted the autopsy found all this very strange, and he decided to conduct his own additional investigation, sending a sample of the spine of the deceased to a highly specialized specialist who could give a conclusion regarding the integrity of the spinal cord. If the spinal cord was damaged, then Ellen would be paralyzed and unable to stab herself in the heart. But soon the expert miraculously changed his mind and abandoned his investigation, stating that according to his report, the spinal cord had not been damaged. However, the conclusion itself was never attached to the case materials. It also didn't bother anyone that with such numerous and extensive wounds on Ellen's body, there was very little blood around, which could indicate that someone had wiped it off, but no one even bothered to look for possible washed-away marks. The luminol used in such cases was simply ignored. The trash cans in the apartment were also not examined, and if there was any evidence in them, they were lost forever. The unhappy parents were informed of the death of their only daughter by the Goldberg family, for they were the first on the scene. Ellen's family lived in another town, a couple hundred miles away from their daughter, but they arrived as quickly as they could. Santa and George couldn't believe what was happening, and flatly denied that Ellen could have taken her own life. But the grief-stricken parents were never given a clear answer to the question of what happened that night with their daughter, only a dry conclusion and refusal to initiate criminal proceedings. Then the Greenbergs decided to conduct their own investigation with the involvement of independent specialists. Soon they were contacted by a private detective who offered his help completely free of charge because he himself wanted to understand this confusing case. The detective studied the materials and came to the conclusion that Ellen's body was moved after her death. This was evidenced by a dried blood trickle from her nose toward her ear. But Ellen was found in a sitting position, so the blood couldn't have traveled that way. He also found smeared stains on the floor, very similar to drag marks. In addition, after a second one, the guard remembered that Sam, who had asked for help, was wearing a tracksuit and said he had come back from the gym, but he was wearing boots. He did not have a bag with a change of shoes with him. But despite the new evidence and witness testimony, the parents of the deceased were again denied a criminal case or further investigation. The Greenbergs were even denied case files, including a recording of Sam's phone call to the police, as well as surveillance footage showing the time he walked toward the gym and then returned from there. 4 years later, a new young officer has joined the county's homicide unit, taking a position as an assistant prosecutor. He had heard about the unsolved, strange case while he was still studying at the university, and now he decided to get materials from the archives and get to the truth. His attention was drawn to the injury to the back of the head, which could be the first to indicate that Ellen had been attacked from behind when she hadn't expected it. Also of interest to him was the note that there was no spinal cord injury, but there was no official document to prove it. All of the ADA's attempts to find any report regarding the spinal injuries were unsuccessful. It was allegedly lost somewhere in the archives. Then he made an official request to the Center of Forensic Medical Examination to get a duplicate of the document. And then it turned out that no one had ever given such a conclusion, and the body was not examined for spinal cord injuries. At the same time, a fragment of the spine had somehow miraculously been preserved and could be re-examined. An independent specialist was brought in and determined that the spinal cord had been damaged in several places at once, so that Ellen could not have inflicted further injuries on herself. The resulting materials were passed to the police, but there, after reviewing them, again refused to initiate criminal proceedings. In 2018, the coroner gave an official conclusion, which stated that all 20 wounds the deceased had inflicted on herself, and there can be no doubt about it. New investigation. Once again, amid a stalemate of justice, the grief-stricken parents hired a new attorney with whom they recollected all the documents, previously unrecorded evidence, facts, and witness statements. In 2019, they filed a new lawsuit against the coroner and experts who had improperly done their jobs and effectively collapsed the case. The following spring, the lawsuit was heard and settled, but trials never began due to the pandemic raging around the world. It was expected that the case would be reclassified, but due to the negligence of the police and medical examiners, as well as the resulting confusion, crucial evidence was lost and irretrievably lost. The parents of the dead girl even created a page in the social network dedicated to the progress of the investigation, where they share official materials, new details, and versions. Family, friends, and colleagues of Ellen insist that she could not take her own life, and even do it in such a heinous way. Ellen, in principle, did not tolerate the sight of blood. It made her sick, and she also had a low pain threshold, because of which she has never done tattoos or piercings. In the summer of 2022, the case was dismissed again, but the Greenbergs got it transferred to the district attorney's office, where a new prosecutor took over. The investigation began again, 11 years after those terrible events. But to this day, the investigation has never been finalized. How did Sam's fate turn out? For the first year after the tragedy, Samuel tried to keep in touch with his estranged father-in-law and mother-in-law. However, he did not take any part in the investigations initiated by them. He flatly refused to communicate with the police, and it seemed that he was not interested in the case. He himself adhered to the official version that his fiancée himself inflicted fatal injuries. Goldberg soon found solace with another girl, and just a year later married her. Together with his wife, he moved to another state and stopped contact with the Greenberg family. Now he and his wife are raising 2 children together, and about the dead ex-fiancé, Sam tries not to remember. What do you guys think? Is Sam responsible for Ellen's death? Every relationship of a person is based on the pillar of trust, whether it's between parents and children, husband and wife, or even between boyfriend and girlfriend. But if someone breaks the trust of another person in these essential relationships and starts thinking badly about them, it feels really terrible. And today's case is somewhat similar, where a boy and a girl from Pakistan were very happy in their relationship. But then, after some time, the girl breaks up because she started seeing a dark side of her boyfriend. But then, what the boy did with his girlfriend shook the entire Pakistan. Shaukat Ali Muqaddam was not only a normal citizen of Pakistan, but also a diplomat and ambassador of Pakistan. Due to this, he had to live in different countries. However, in 2021, he was living in Islamabad, Pakistan. Apart from this, at one point, Shaukat Ali had also been Pakistan's ambassador to South Korea and Kazakhstan. Because of this, he held a very high position in Pakistan. There were a total of 5 people in his family, including Shaukat Muqaddam, his wife Kausar Muqaddam, 2 daughters and 1 son. October 23, 1993, was the day when a beautiful girl was born in Shaukat Ali's house, whom they named Noor. Noor was a healthy and cute baby who always laughed and never bothered anyone too much. Although Shaukat's professional life was very busy and stressful, but when he came home, He spent quality time with his family. As a result, his children had a very good upbringing. From school days, Noor had a great interest in studying. She always used to read either school books or other books. Now, because Shaukat Muqaddam was a diplomat, he used to get transferred to other countries due to his work, which is why Noor started her schooling from Ireland. Then she completed high school from South Korea. After South Korea, the family moved to Kazakhstan, but Noor thinks about completing her college in the US, where her older sister Sarah also lived. However, after the US, Noor returned to Pakistan, Islamabad. As humble and smart as Noor was in her childhood, she was equally humble and smart in her adult years. That's why everyone at home trusted Noor and easily accepted her decisions. Besides, Noor loved animals, especially stray dogs and cats. She used to feed them whenever she had time. Although Noor belonged to a wealthy family, she never had a liking for materialistic things. By hearing all these things, you must have understood that Noor was a kind-hearted, down-to-earth, intelligent and confident girl. Along with all these things, Noor also had a great passion for art and calligraphy. She often made religious paintings too. As I mentioned, coming from a wealthy diplomat family, parties were a common occurrence at the diplomats' homes. So Shaukat Muqaddam often took his family to such parties because they were excellent for networking and building connections. It was at one such party in 2018 that Noor met a boy named Zahir Jaffer. Zahir and Noor are both going to be key characters in this case. So before we proceed, let's take a brief look at Zahir's background. Zahir Jaffer was born in the USA, but he spent his childhood and teenage years in Pakistan. After that, Zahir pursued his graduation in the US and also spent some time living in the UK. Zahir's father was Zakir Jaffer, who was a very successful businessman. Due to his father's business ventures, the Jaffer family was one of the wealthiest families in Pakistan. The Jaffer family had various businesses, including healthcare, oil, real estate, and construction. This also provided them with opportunities to work with their country's military. One of these companies is Ahmed Jaffer and Company, where Zahir Jaffer is now the CEO, while his father, Zakir Jaffer, used to oversee the company. But after some time, Zahir's mood changed, and he started working as a therapist at a company called Therapy Works. In this company, Zahir used to listen to the children of the school and explain to them about mental health care. He also used to arrange lectures and presentations for the children. But the shocking thing here is that Zahir himself was an introverted and angry since childhood. He also had very few friends, and he rarely attended parties with them. But it is at one such party that he meets Noor, and he likes her, and Noor also enjoys talking to Zahir. Perhaps this happened because their personalities were different, and people say that opposite personalities are attracted to each other. However, both their families already knew each other because they used to attend such parties. But friendship between Noor and Zahir developed from this party. Then, after some time, this friendship turned into love, and they both entered into a romantic relationship. However, it's not like they kept this fact hidden from their parents or friends. Rather, both their families and friends knew that Zahir and Noor were dating. Both families were happy because Noor completes Zahir and Zahir completes Noor. Actually, Noor brought out a side of Zahir that no one had seen before, whereas Zahir used to be very introverted before. But as soon as he met Noor, his personality began to change gradually. He started enjoying his life, hanging out with people, and at one party, people were surprised to see Zahir dancing with Noor, including Zahir's family, because they had never thought they would see this side of Zahir's personality. Everything was going well, but as the relationship grew older, things started to deteriorate. Initially, everything was going well in the relationship. Both were enjoying themselves, and their families were also very happy. But then, after some time, a different side of Zahir came out in front of Noor. Actually, Noor later finds out that Zahir is a very aggressive and abusive man. Allegedly, Zahir had physically and mentally abused Noor several times. Not only that, Zahir had also raised his hand against his own mother before. As a result, After almost 3 years of relationship, when Noor couldn't bear Zahir anymore, she broke up with him at the beginning of 2021. In both families, there was dissatisfaction over their children ending the relationship. Because neither of them was a normal family, and in such affluent households, it's not typical for a boy and a girl to enter a relationship, break up shortly after, and then enter into a relationship with someone else later. In fact, people like them also see relationships as a business. Like most wealthy families, they marry off their sons or daughters where they can profit. But besides that, Zahir was also displeased that Noor left him, and now he took it as an affront to his male ego. However, after some time, Zahir also started thinking about moving on, and then he thought he would go back to the US and settle there because he also had US citizenship along with Pakistani citizenship. Now let's jump to July 18th, 2021. On this day, Zahir booked a taxi to go to Islamabad International Airport. Actually, according to Pakistan Standard Time, Zahir's flight to New York was at 3:50 a.m. on July 19th. He had already packed his bags and informed his family about it. But before leaving, he wanted to meet Noor just once, so he called Noor on the evening of July 18th. At that time, Noor was at her home, preparing for Eid with her family. Now, Zahir called Noor and requested, "I am leaving this country for New York, and I will never come back here again, but I will settle in the US, so please meet me once before I leave." Additionally, Zahir told Noor, "Come to my house, we'll meet, and then when I leave for the airport from my house, I'll drop you off at your home first." Although these two had already broken up, before that they had been in a relationship for 3 years, which led Noor to say yes to meeting Zahir. After that, at 9:05 p.m., Noor leaves her house. But she doesn't tell her family that she's going to Zahir's house. She just says she's going to her friend's house and will be back soon. Around 10 p.m., Noor arrives outside Zahir's house at the scent location in Sector F74. But strange things start happening from here. Now, as I told you, Zahir's flight was at 3:50 a.m., but between 10 and 11 p.m., Zahir calls his travel agency multiple times. Zahir called his travel agency and started asking them very strange questions like, "What would happen if I don't board this flight? Will I get my refund back? If I decide to book tickets again after 10 days, what will happen?" Sometime later, Zahir called his travel agency again and said that now I'm not canceling my ticket, but I've decided to go to the US on this flight. But let me tell you, during this time, Noor was inside his house with him. But for her, this house was a new place because she had never been here before. Afterward, the taxi that Zahir had booked to go to the airport also arrives outside Jathar's house at exactly 11 p.m. However, Zahir doesn't come out of the house for half an hour. Meanwhile, the taxi driver called Zahir 2 or 3 times, but Zahir told him to wait, saying, "I'll be there in just 5 minutes." However, at 12:07 a.m., he calls the taxi driver again and says, "My plan to go to the airport is canceled now. Anyway, if we leave for the airport now, I won't be able to catch my flight." Despite waiting for more than an hour, Zahir pays the taxi driver half the fare. Actually, Zahir had booked this taxi for 2,000 Pakistani rupees. Now, after that, the taxi driver leaves from there. But at 1:40 a.m., Zahir calls the taxi driver again and asks him to come back to his house. Now, the taxi driver also returns to Zahir's house because he knew he would get the full payment. But this time too, Zahir made the taxi driver wait outside the house for a few minutes, and then at 2:15 a.m., Zahir comes out with his luggage. But the strange thing this time was that Noor was also with him, and she didn't have sandals on her feet, which the driver found very strange. However, what struck him as even strange was that Zahir was talking to Noor during the car ride, but Noor wasn't responding to his words. Although the driver didn't pay much attention to this at the time, halfway through, Zahir told the driver, "Now take the car back towards home anyway. We're already very late. I don't think we'll make it to the airport on time and catch the flight." After that, the taxi driver drops them off again at Jaffar's house at 2:35 a.m. But as soon as Noor got out of the taxi, Zahir pulled her inside the house. According to the taxi driver's statement, he felt like Noor wasn't supposed to go back inside the house with Zahir, but Zahir forcefully took her inside. Then, on July 19th, Noor stayed at Zahir's house the whole day, and then July 20th arrived, which was the day of Eid. Noor had come to Zahir's house to meet him on July 18th at 9:05 p.m., but now it had been more than 24 hours, and Noor's father and mother had returned home after shopping for Eid. But when they find out that their daughter has been missing from home for 24 hours, at 12:57 a.m. on July 20th, Shaukat Muqaddam texts his daughter, asking her where she is. However, Noor doesn't reply to that text message. Then, at 5:48 a.m., Noor's mother messages her, and two family friends also call Noor, yet there is no response from Noor. This causes worry for Noor's parents, and they were about to inform the police about it. But at 10:43 a.m., Noor sends a voice recording to her mother. However, the contents of that recording were never made public, but it was the last time Noor's mother, Kausar Muqaddam, heard her daughter's voice. But after sending the voice message, another strange thing happens. Zahir immediately calls Noor's mother from his own phone and tells her that Noor is not at his house, trying to prove that he hasn't even seen Noor. Then, from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. that same day, Zahir repeatedly calls his father, Zakir Jaffer. However, at around 7:10 p.m., Noor is seen on CCTV cameras. But by that time, her condition was very bad, and it seemed as though Zahir had tortured her severely. In the CCTV footage, Noor is seen jumping from the balcony of Zahir's house on the first floor and falling directly onto an iron grill. This caused her to sustain an injury to her abdomen, which is why she is seen holding her stomach in this clip. She was actually distressed by Zahir's harassment and wanted to leave the house. However, the security guard closed the gate, and meanwhile Zahir also jumps from the balcony to catch Noor and brings her back inside. But as he was bringing her back, Noor falls down, but Zahir drags her inside. Now, I should tell you that it wasn't just Zahir and Noor inside the house. There was also a security guard, a cook, and a gardener. But none of them helped Noor. In fact, from July 18th to July 20th, Noor attempted to escape from this house 6 times. But each time, one of Zahir's servants informed him, and Noor was always caught. But this time, because of Noor's attempt to escape, Zahir becomes very angry. After bringing Noor back inside, he calls his father once again around 7:30 p.m. But since then, Zahir didn't call anyone for 30 minutes, because in the meantime, Zahir first attempts to shoot Noor with his handgun, but as soon as he presses the trigger, his gun jams. However, even after that, Zahir doesn't stop wanting to kill Noor. It was already in his mind. So he takes out a Swiss knife and starts stabbing every part of Noor's body. Meanwhile, Noor scratches Zahir's face and arms with her nails, but after some time, Noor's condition deteriorates so much that she faints. Noor was unconscious, but even then, Zahir kept stabbing her with the knife. Afterward, he grabs Noor by the throat and keeps squeezing until Noor's last breath is gone. Later, Noor's post-mortem report reveals that she died due to lack of oxygen, but before killing Noor, Zahir ripped her several times. But Zahir didn't stop there. After Noor's death, he pulled out his knife and started cutting Noor's throat, and finally, he severed her head from her body. After killing Noor, Zahir quickly calls his father and friends, saying, "Thieves have broken into our house, and I need help." At the same time, some of Zahir's friends head towards his house. However, Zahir's father wasn't there. That's why he called the CEO of the company where Zahir worked, named Therapy Works, and said, "Quickly go to my house and save my son at any cost." In reality, Zahir's father, Zakir Jaffer, called the CEO of that company because they needed to erase all evidence of Noor's murder by going to Zahir. Moreover, the CEO of the company had to comply because Zahir's father was funding the company. Around 8:30 p.m., Tahir Zahur, the CEO of Therapy Works, arrives outside Zahir's house with his 6 employees. Additionally, some of Zahir's friends were also present. However, the door of Zahir's house remained closed, so Tahir took a ladder and, with his employees, entered through the window on the first floor. But as soon as they reached the first floor, Zahir attacked one of the employees with a knife, piercing through his chin and tongue. Zahir was extremely angry at that moment, so 5 to 6 people quickly grabbed him to control him. After this, Zahir's hands were tied behind his back, and ropes were also tied around his feet. But as soon as the people went inside Zahir's room from the balcony, they were stunned. In fact, there was blood everywhere on the floor, even on the walls of the room. Then they saw Noor's body in the center of the room, but her head was 3 feet away from her body. Now, everyone inside the room was astonished to regain control over Zahir, and after seeing Noor's dead body. But in the meantime, the neighbors were also quite alert, because when Zahir was being caught, he was screaming a lot, which made his neighbors call the police. After that, the police arrived there, and then on July 20th, around 10 o'clock at night, the police called Shaukat Nukadarm to inform him that his daughter had been murdered. Hearing this sad news, Lukadam's family home was engulfed in mourning because their youngest and dearest daughter was no longer in this world. But Noor's family knew who had done all this, and now they wanted to punish Zahir according to Pakistan law, meaning the death penalty. After that, the police arrested Zahir, but now they were worried about how Zahir would confess his crime. But Zahir did something very strange here too. As soon as the police caught Zahir, he confessed in a short while that he was the one who had killed Noor, and he had done so because he loved Noor very much. He had even proposed marriage to Noor, but she had rejected his marriage proposal and later broke up with him. This hurt Zahir's ego, so he booked his and Noor's one-way tickets to New York for July 19th. But before this, Zahir had decided that if Noor agreed to go to New York with him, they would get married and settle in New York. But if Noor didn't agree, he would kill her. However, from July 18th to 20th, Zahir tried to convince Noor for marriage, but when Noor refused to marry him, Zahir finally assaulted her very brutally. Although all the servants in Zahir's house knew what Zahir did with Noor, none of them tried to stop him even once, not even daring to call the police, because they were afraid that if they did, Zahir would not spare them. Now, even though Zahir had confessed his crime in front of the police, when the case went to court, he was behaving strangely in court. Firstly, he entered the court looking disheveled as if he hadn't bathed for days. Besides, he shouted loudly in the courtroom, even abusing the judge. Furthermore, the police had to drag him into the court and out of the court forcefully. However, he was doing all these things to prove that he is mentally unstable, and because of this, he should be spared from the death penalty for the murder of Noor. If it were proven that Zahir is mentally unstable, then firstly, his punishment would be reduced, and secondly, he would escape the death penalty. Actually, Zahir had schizophrenia, and he wanted to take advantage of it by telling the court that he is mentally unfit. Actually, schizophrenia is a serious mental illness in which a person is mostly lost in the world of imagination and knows very little about the real world. Because of this, he often behaves strangely. But when Zahir's medical examination was done, the report clearly stated that Zahir is mentally fit, and whatever he did with Noor, he did it consciously. But this made it clear that Zahir was an abuser and an aggressive person. Besides, there were many harassment cases against Zahir in both the US and Pakistan. In this case, during the ongoing trial in court, the entire Pakistan raised its voice for justice for Noor. Rallies and marches were held every day. As a result, on February 24, 2022, Noor received justice, and Zahir was sentenced to 2 death penalties, one for physically assaulting Noor and the other for her murder. Additionally, his 2 house staff, Iftikhar and Mohammed Jan, were also sentenced to 10 years in jail. Looking at the photos, you wouldn't know much, but Zahir was a powerful, tall, and aggressive man with whom a sweet and innocent girl, Noor, spent almost 48 hours. And those 48 hours were nothing less than hell for her. So with this, the Noor Mukada murder case comes to an end right here. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Thank you.